Hello everybody, my name's Charlotte and welcome to my craft room here in Drumming. Today we're going to do some knitting. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, we're going to do a community knit along. We all knit our different squares and then once we're allowed out again, we can get together and sew our patterns, our squares together to make some blankets. So first of all, what do you need? Well, you need some knitting needles. These are ordinary straight knitting needles. So I've chosen a 4mm needle, so it's either 4mm or if it's got a number on it, if it's in the American needles a size 6 or UK it's size 8s, so it just depends what needles you've got as to how they're numbered, but mine are 4mm, so they're all the same size. And then you also need some yarn, so I've just chosen some nice colours that I thought might work nicely together, and will just be, so any yarn that you've got. This is double knit yarn. Let's get started. So we have our knitting needles and our yarn. So first of all we need to make a slip knot. So you take your length of yarn, wrap it round your finger and then pull the back bit through to the front like so, and then just pop it onto your needle. So that's your slip knot. And now we need to cast on, we need 32 stitches altogether, so we need to cast on another 31. And the way that we do that is with the thumb on method. So again, with your short tail in your left hand, you wind, hold it with your fist almost, and then wind this round your thumb like that. Get this right needle into the yarn, and the yarn in your right hand goes round the needle, pulls off like that. So wind round, put the needle in, get this yarn round the needle, and then this goes over like so. So you've cast on. So now we have our 32 stitches along our needle, and then we can pop that into our left hand, and we're going to do some knit stitches. So you get your right needle, push it into your left, into the first stitch on your left hand like that. Rest that needle on your index finger if it helps, and then get your long tail round the needle, pull it through, and then off your left needle onto your right needle. Okay, I'll do that again. Go in, round the needle, through and off. In, round, through and off. Just to show you, once you've done a few rows, this is what it should look like. And this is the garter stitch. And we need to knit 57 of these rows, or until your work measures either 15 centimetres or 6 inches. So there's our first square finished. Now we need to learn how to cast off. So very much the same as you've been knitting now. You put your right needle in, round the needle as you would before, and knit. And then you knit the second stitch, just as that. But instead of knitting the third one, you put your left needle into the first stitch that you knitted, like so, and thread it or lead it over the second stitch and off the needle, so you're left with one stitch on. You knit another stitch, then you take that what has become the first stitch now, gets pulled over the second stitch and off the needle. So knit and then pull over and off. So that's casting off. Once you've cast off all your stitches and you're just left with the last stitch on the needle, all you do is break the yarn or cut the yarn a little way down and then thread it through the last stitch like that and just pull it tight, and that's your first square finished. The next stitch I'm going to show you how to do is purl stitch. You do your foundation row as before, and then this time you get your right needle and you leave the yarn that you're working with that's coming from the ball, that stays at the front of your work, whereas with knit stitch it always was at the back, it's at the front. So you need to just loop, sort of tuck your needle behind the yarn so it's always at the front, and then pop the needle in from right to left, put the yarn round the needle, pull it through like that, and then off. Okay, I'll show you again. In, through, round the needle, through and off. So in, round, through and off, but with the yarn at the front. And that's purl stitch. Square 2 of the knit along challenge, we're going to use the stitch or pattern called seed stitch or moss stitch, and for this you have to cast on an odd number of stitches. So for our pattern we're going to have 35 stitches, and the way that seed stitch works is you start off doing a knit stitch and then you do it's a knit and purl pattern, so then you have to do a purl stitch. And the way we change between doing knit and purl stitches is moving this working yarn round the needle before you do the next stitch. So the next one will be a purl stitch, then we have to move it back round the needle and then do our knit stitch, back round the needle and do purl stitch, back round the needle, do knit stitch. Okay, so that's our first row. So we finished our first row of knit purl and we start our second row. So we knit our first stitch, yarn round the needle and purl the second stitch, yarn round the needle, knit the next stitch, and so on until the end of the row. And there's our second row done, and as you can see it's quite a nice pattern there. So we continue doing this pattern for the rest of our square. And there we have our square of moss stitch. Isn't it lovely? And don't forget, when you come to cast off, when you've done knit and purl stitches, you do a knit stitch and a purl stitch and then you cast off in the normal way, but you carry on doing your pattern across the row with the knit and purl. So that's the first 2 squares finished. Well done. In my next video I'll be showing you the patterns for the next 2 squares. Thanks for watching this video for Louisburgh Community TV, and don't forget, if you like it, please press the thumbs up button and share it with a friend. And subscribe to the Louisburgh Community TV channel. Bye for now.